Greetings, Fred in Alaska. Wish to apologize about that video upload earlier. It was a mistake when I was going through my library of videos. But it gave me an opportunity to redo the video and just speak about some things that kind of I've been compiling in my mind as far as behaviors of these things and certain similarities and certain things that are just like, you know, out to lunch. And they're a bit I'll do a separate video on that. I gotta collect my thoughts on that, because I get into it and then I start thinking about when they threw the rock at me and when I shot at them and things like this. So it really I need to write it down so it's more cohesive when I share with you guys. So however, Thomas with the Cape thing, when he went back in the 80s to check it out, he didn't find anything there. The hole had been stuffed with broken pieces of log, moss, and it had a real musty smell. When they hiked back to check out where he had dumped the carcass or the torso, they didn't find anything. You know, a lot of time had passed and there was nothing to find there. So that being said, let me share with you, this will be Bush Pilot. Known this guy a while. Now, when he picks up clients and he will fly them remote for bear hunts and what have you. This was back when he was still guiding. This was in 1997. He picked up a client that landed in Iliamna, and he had been running fuel to remote spots to have fuel staged for this trip so he could be out in the field and not have to fly all the way back to civilization to have some fuel. So he was doing his thing, and he goes and picks up his client. Now his client knew just enough to be dangerous. The guy didn't have a whole lot of outdoor experience except maybe a week or two a year, and that was usually guided and not of his own knowledge, so to speak. So he knew enough to be dangerous is what it was. He knew just enough to be dangerous. So he picks up his client, and they're flying due west, heading to the Bering Coast from Iliamna, just due west. And as they were getting ready to clear all little valleys and little mountains in that area, leaving Iliamna to the west, they come across this lake. And this guy had been up in the area before, and he goes, "Oh, that's Beaver Lake. There's big moose there. Let's go, go down there. Let's check it out. There's always big moose there." My buddy, the pilot, was like, "Yeah, we'll check it out." This guy was paying a lot of money. We'll leave it at that. Any guide, you're paying a simple brown bear hunt, you're looking at 16 grand or better, and that was I'm quoting prices from 10 years ago. So extrapolate that. Damn mosquitoes. So anyone sees anything buzzing around, they're not pigeons, they're mosquitoes. So he acknowledges the guy's request, and he circles down, they land, and where he landed, he parked up where it was obvious a beaver slip right there, where a beaver comes out of the lake or into the little pond or whatever, and had a little trail back into the trees where it would gnaw down its trees and add to its dam and its house and all that shit. So he parked right there, and he split the trail with his pontoons, and he had two stakes. They were just basically stakes you would use for form making for concrete, just a simple round stake. And so he would pound them into the ground and use it to tie off his pontoon so the wind wouldn't drag his plane to the other side of the lake. Now, the guy he was with, he told him, "Look, we flew today, we can't hunt today. Leave your rifle, I'll bring mine for protection, bring a sidearm, we're only looking." Guy was like, "Okay, well, we're only looking." He wasn't going to argue with the guide, because the guide would just take him the fuck out of there. That's what I would do. He's not going to risk his plane, his license, and all that shit, because they'll confiscate everything. You go hunting illegal in Alaska, you'll fucking find out, man. You'll lose your truck, four-wheeler, anything you use to transport that meat. Forget it, dude. Gone. State owns it. You'll see a trooper driving your shit, using your boat to go and arrest some other idiot. So don't do it. Anyway, that being said, they get out and they're going up this little trail. Now this is a real narrow trail that a beaver made, obviously, and it's kind of muddy and stuff, so they're just kind of walking off to the side of it. Now, the way it looks, where they anchored up, or where they tied off at, going straight ahead, that little beaver trail goes straight, then it kind of J-hooks to the left, and it's kind of like a reverse question mark that goes up this ridge. But between that, as it J-hooks to the left, there's a stand of trees, black spruce, alders, birch, some cottonwood, and willows, all interspersed, very, very similar to what we have here behind me, but denser, thicker. I've cleared some of this out. This is my property here. I got cottonwoods down back over there for the moose that I've been talking about and all that. So I was looking in my view and I thought I saw Todd, the fox over there. It wasn't him. It's actually a female fox, named it Todd after Fox and Hound. Anyway, I digress. So as they're going up this trail, stand of trees is there real thick, and as they're going up and about to hit that J-hook, there's movement off to the right. Now, at the J-hook, it's open meadow that kind of arcs in a wide arc to the right, and it's just tree line that arcs around back over the lake and then cuts back down, back towards, it would be the east. And so, because where he ended up parking, they were pretty much facing due north. So they get to that point and they hear noise off to the right just a little ways, and they see trees moving, so they get excited. They're thinking, oh, bull moose is rubbing its antlers. This guy, he brought with him, his client, had some whack-ass elk bugle, right? Unbeknownst to the pilot, unbeknownst to the guide. Had no clue what this guy was doing. So they make the hook, and he's excited. Maybe they're onto something. Maybe they could spike camp and then get this bull in the morning. Well, they're going up and on that reverse question mark kind of loop, going up the ridge, and as they're getting higher, they're getting to be able to see more vantage point and getting more little clear spots to see through the trees. They get up to the apex of it before it starts dropping back down, and then it gets into a bunch of willows and alders and whatnot, and it gets pretty thick in there. So as he got up there, he had his, the guy with him stop, and then he continues to go a little ways and then looks over the edge and starts looking down into this stand of trees and is looking for any sign of that moose. Well, this guy, unbeknownst to him, gets out this whack-ass elk bugle that he didn't know how to use and made this god-awful call with it. He said it scared the shit out of him because it was so it sounded like something being murdered, and it was totally alien to the environment. It had nothing to do with a moose call, any call. Not even an elk would have responded to this thing, right? So he immediately laughs at the guy and says, "Knock that shit off, dude. You're gonna scare everything away. What the fuck are you doing?" So the guy, he's like, "Well, it's brand new. It's patented technology and da 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 da." And he goes, "Well, patent that shit back in your fucking backpack, man." And so the guy begrudgingly, "Well, it'd work if I could practice with it." And he goes, "Dude, we are hunting. You're paying a lot of money. Now is not the time for trial and error. We'll use tried and true cow call and get the moose's attention. You may have scared everything away for miles with that bullshit." So they're having this little discussion, right? And the pilot guide is really, he's seeing what this guy is all about. And he's contemplating the money because he's only a couple hours invested into this. He can easily take this jackass back to Iliamna, tell him bye-bye, refund his money, tell him to kiss some ass and get the fuck on. Which I would have been a strong proponent saying, let's do that. Anyway, so as they're discussing and he's giving him the rundown on his bullshit, like, hey, you're obviously, you don't know as much as you think you do, and just calm down and let's see if there's a viable bull, otherwise we'll call it quits. And the guy, he relented and said, okay. He chilled out with his attitude. So as they're discussing what exactly he was going to do, they noticed the movement continued because it had gotten dead quiet, and then the movement stopped. And so they noticed that the trees were moving again a little bit, but they were moving away kind of back towards that meadow that arced around to their right as they were coming up the path. So they're looking back down. They could see the plane straight in front of them, stand of trees just below them, and they can see part of the J-hook trail, the reverse question mark back down, and then the straight shot back to the plane. Now, off to their right, once that trail hooks around, there's a tree line that wraps the lake around from that side. So, and it was a lot thinner and less, it was more sparsely covered with trees. So, as they were doing that and discussing it, and there was the movement, there was a very low gurgling kind of. He said it was more like a groan, like a death groan from a bear. And so he was contemplating, he was like, man, did we, by happenstance, just come along and land at a lake where a bear is dying off here in the trees? And so he was trying to contemplate, do I want to go and check? You know, do I want to go and check and see if that's a bear or not? And as he's contemplating it, the guy he was guiding for said, hey, I'm gonna head back down to the plane. I don't feel comfortable without my rifle. And the guide was like, no, I don't want you to have a rifle out here. We might not even be staying, so just hold on. And he makes a little cow call, and once he does, the trees move aggressively. Now they're just lined up to where he can't get a totally good view, and so he's a little flustered, but he knows, okay, if I can get this jackass to stay here. He knew he could slip down there, get a little closer, and have some trees for cover and hide from the bull moose if it tried to charge him, because of course moose have antlers and trees will stop that and he can get away. So he decides to do that, and he goes down over the little ridge, and he's going through the willows, and he didn't realize how tall they were, but they were over his head. So he took this little game trail that cut through, and when he comes through the opening, he's leading with his rifle, right? And he has open sights on it for good reason, because close quarter, you don't want to try to be putting something in a scope. You want to put a bead on it and drop it. So he comes through, he shakes free of the brush, and the little game trail splits into a Y. And so he takes the Y to the left, because that would take him almost directly to where this noise was being made. So he's going along slow, and periodically he would look back to make sure the fucking idiot was up on the hill just glassing. He told him, you just glass. Anything bad happens, then you can go to the plane and get the rifle. Guy was, chomping at the bit to have a gun. And I understand. He's in remote Alaska. Fuck, there's huge bears out there, So he's going along, and he starts getting a funny feeling that he's being watched, and not by, he just chalked it up to that guy, glassing him from behind. He notices movement about 50 feet in front of him, just out of view. Every time he was coming, it would just be out of view. Then all of a sudden, Yahoo on the ridge, inexperienced guy. I won't call him a Yahoo. He's just inexperienced and easily excited. He's up on the ridge doing fucking jumping jacks, screaming. And he turns around and he's yelling at him, hey, cut it out. And the guy's going frantic, just ape shit, trying to get his attention, just throwing rocks and saying, run, run, run. And so he's turning around, he's looking, he's like, what the fuck am I running for? There's no immediate danger. So he realized that he must be seeing something I don't, and he happened to be far enough away, he couldn't make out what the fuck that guy was saying. And so immediately he figures, I better reevaluate, let me get out of here. So he starts backtracking, and as he's backtracking, he realizes that movement he was noticing was actually circling, doing a little half circle to come around. And just as he got back to where that little split was the Y, there was a hairy man standing there off to his left. Because as he was backtracking, he would turn, and as he got to that Y split, he happened to turn to the right, and as he was swinging back left, he noticed it right off to his left, basically in the middle of the split, about 25 feet back in the trees. He said the look on his face, he told me that the look on this thing's face is what gave him a gray streak of hair. That's what he told me. So I take that with a grain of salt, but he seemed pretty convinced of it. He said it shook him to his core. It let out a scream, and he didn't realize he was on his knees from the fear, and he couldn't, he was trying to run, but his legs weren't under him, so he couldn't. And there was a disconnect within him, like what was going on versus, attack or retreat. Now, this dude's been out in the woods for quite some time by this point. Very experienced, seen it all kind of pilot, crashed a couple times, that kind of guy, not doing dumb shit, just weather circumstances, got caught in a box canyon, all this type of shit. So it wasn't his lack of knowledge, it was circumstances, that he had been in some crashes and, all that, but he knew something was terribly wrong, because he kept trying to coordinate his legs, and he said he felt like he had extra weight on him, and he had chalked that up to the fear he was dealing with. And the guy up on the hill, his client had a sidearm on his hip, and he knew he did. He had some kind of 1911 45 or something like that, and he yelled back up the hill, "Shoot it, shoot it!" Yeah, he was getting the impression that he was being held somehow by this thing. Now, I've never personally heard that. I've heard being frozen in your tracks. You know what I mean? I don't know. He never elaborated on what made him feel like this particular thing was doing it, which is creepy on a whole different fucking level. I tell you that much. So the guy listens, and the guy isn't shooting it. He's shooting in the air. Well, that 45 only had a 7-round mag, and the guy just mag dumped the fucking thing, right? Didn't have any other bullets for it, just mag dump. Bump, 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 bump. You know, shot him off, and the hairy man just walked away to his left, and out of sight. And the whole time he's holding the gun, but he couldn't pull it together to function to put a shot on it. He felt that had that guy not started popping shots, he may not have been there. And he said he wasn't confident it was the gunshots that caused it to walk off to the left, because it was not intimidated, it was not scared, it didn't even flinch when the shots were popping. So he was able to scramble to his feet. He turns around, and he's right at the Y, so all he's got to do is turn around and cut up through the brush. And that's exactly what he did. He gets up to the top of that little ridge, and that particular Y he was at, had he ran to the right, that little path would have cut right through to almost the apex of that half reversed question mark. He didn't know that. He found out later on a different trip. But anyway, so he gets up to the top of the ridge again, and the guy's empty, and he goes, "Do you got any bullets?" And he goes, "Yeah, I don't have any. Let's go. It's not time to talk. Let's go." They got to walk all the way back around. Now, this thing walked off to his left, but it was still well within real quick access to them from where it went. It didn't go far. It just kind of walked off to where it wasn't as easily seen, but it stopped, and it was right over there, kind of thing. So they come back down around, and they're almost to that little J hook that shoots a straight shot back to the plane. When they come to that point, he's shaking really hard, and he's got that rifle trained in that direction. He's got his client in front of him, and the guy is actually beating feet. He's getting the fuck out of Dodge. And as he comes to that little apex of a turn on that final little J hook to the straight stretch, he stops, and he pans, and he sees movement, and it's going to his right in that same spot where that tree line curves kind of like in a half moon shape back around to the lake. And so he's watching it. He's got a bead on it as it's running just inside the tree line, and he wasn't trying to shoot it. He just wanted to make sure it wasn't going to come out. Well, he didn't know that this thing was distracting him, because behind him, as he's following this thing, his client had came back, and he wasn't even paying attention. He was so focused on this thing running, and it wasn't running as fast as it could. It was just making noise as it was going through, but at a pretty quick clip. So he's following, and all of a sudden the guy's behind him and says, "Hey!" And it startles the shit out of him, right? Because he was so focused and so wigged out by the whole situation. The guy coming back up behind him scared the shit out of him, right? So he turns around and he's like, "What the fuck? What are you doing? You're supposed to be at that plane." The guy was like, "Look over my shoulder." The guy was freaking out. He had tears coming down his face. He goes, "Look over my shoulder." He turns and looks over the guy's shoulder and doesn't see nothing. Kind of leans a little bit. Then he seen it. There was another one. 10, 15 feet away. Just crouched down real low. Same thing. Black translucent like eyes. With the deadly, just this deadly gaze of like, "I'm going to kill you" kind of look. And so immediately the guy, the client, had tears running down his eyes, and he goes, "We have to go." And so this idiot, all of a sudden, that he had perceived as an idiot, had moments of clarity where he was like, "Look at me and follow me. I'm going to turn, and we're going to talk to each other, and I'm going to walk backwards. You just be aware of that. And so the guy's trying to coach him through it, and he was like, no, we got it. Turn around and run. Guy turns around, takes off running, and he makes eye contact with it again, and as he does, it stands up. And he said when it stood up, it was over 10 feet tall, and it was showing his teeth, big, block, yellowy kind of teeth. The eye teeth were a little bigger than ours, but it was all in proportion. Really broad jaw, native looking around the eyes, Native American, heavy, deep wrinkles all through and through. Flat nose, almost very similar to the description I have of him. And he said it stood there, and it was making a kind of noise, and it was progressively getting louder. And so he's trying to walk, but he's sidestepping down this little, he's in this little groove that the beaver would walk down, right? And so he's tripping into that every once in a while, trying to not lose sight of this thing, but make a distance between them. Now, when he was telling me this, he was shaking his leg really hard when he was explaining it to me when we were talking about it. And this was in 97, so it stuck with him very hard, very heavy. He said that it was the look of death, and he, for some reason, he couldn't take his eyes off that look of death in its eyes, that it was going to kill him. He never once pointed the gun at that one. He had it close to his chest. He had it upright. He wasn't waving it at it. He felt that it wasn't enough gun, and that if he had tried to shoot it, there was one somewhere he lost track of that was gaining his attention, going around that meadow. And so he felt like he was trapped, but with an exit. So he backtracks. Now, his client untied the pontoons, put the ropes in, put the stakes in, as he slowly tried to mind fuck himself out of this situation, because he said it felt so surreal that he would pinch his forearm every once in a while. As he was backing up slowly, he would just reach and pinch the forearm, do anything to make sure he wasn't dreaming. And so he never once pointed the gun at it. He made it back. He didn't even realize he was at the plane until he bumped into his own prop, right? That's how focused this thing was. Now, it stayed where it was, but it just came out parallel to him, but made sure that eye contact didn't break. So once he felt the prop, he slung the rifle, walked back, stepped up on the pontoon. The guy had the Super Cub door, the upper one clicks up into place and the lower one drops down. As he's sliding the rifle in between the seats towards the back for the guy to take and put in in the back or whatever. This thing is still doing this, and it's progressively getting louder. It seemed like the more he was closer to leaving, the louder this was getting. All of a sudden, as he's just stepping up to get in there to fire up the magnetos and, kick up the prop, the loudest scream he ever heard came from immediately to his left. He was distracted by the one over there making eye contact. There was one immediately to his left, about 20 feet away, just off the side of the bank of the lake he didn't even see. He said it blended in seamlessly. He didn't notice until it screamed at him and got his attention, and he looked, and it had been there the whole fucking time. He don't know why he didn't see it, but it just blended in seamlessly. So immediately, he's in there. He didn't even shut the doors. He fired up the prop, and he had to jump back out and push the plane away, because there's no reverse in the plane. He didn't have like some turbo otter where he can just adjust the tilt of the prop and back it up himself. So he had to jump back out, freak the fuck out. He wet himself. It was involuntary. He didn't even realize, but he had jumped in the lake to push off. So as they were floating, plane's running. It's loud as shit. But the plane has to drift back a little bit to where he has enough room to power and turn away from the bank without grounding out. Now, as this is going on, this thing is still screaming, one long breath, and it's paralleling him on the shore of this fucking pond. Like, it's letting him know the whole time. And he said it was a female. And when I asked, well, how do you know it was a female? He goes, well, it had hairy, perky breast, and I was like, how big was it? He said it was about 7.5 foot tall, a lot more petite, real broad in the hips, um, very grizzled in hair color, looked more. He said like caveman, like Neanderthal type, because the brow on the female it seemed more pronounced for its size than that bigger one, and so he's trying to put it all together, because up until he had to taxi down to the other end of the lake to turn around and power up to take off into the wind. Now, the whole time, he's trying to, he's throttling up to keep moving pretty quick, and he's trying to keep enough distance offshore to make sure he can't get got. So he gets down to the turnaround point, and just as he does, the thing takes off running, hits the tree line, and they were all gone. He powered up, flew the fuck out of there. He flew all the way back to Iliamna with his door open, and it meant nothing to him. He was stuck on his stick and working his ailerons and doing all his little shit in a Super Cub. That particular guy he took guiding is actually now his best friend. And he told me that at the end of the story, like I'm telling you now. And I thought it was funny. I was like, well, why do you still label the guy a fucking idiot and all this other stuff? He goes, because I love him. And it's a guy thing. It's a guy thing. But he laced him up on proper Alaskan hunting and to not be such a D-bag. Yeah, when I talked to Thomas this morning, he's almost 90. His daughter does his running for him or whatever. If I can make it to where he lives, hopefully sometime in the near future, he wants to share with you guys on camera his whole experience and some other experiences. So I'm hoping that everything goes well to where I can facilitate that happening. But time will tell. Sorry again for the upload earlier. Shit happens, what the fuck you gonna do? Laugh or cry. So we'll see you on the next one.